Have you ever wondered how the OCD cycle begins and what you can do to stop it or break the cycle? Today, I'm going to show you how. Hi, I'm Paige Pradko. Welcome to Therapy for a Better Life. Now, before I continue, if you're wondering if you might have OCD, I left you a free assessment in the description below this video, along with a downloadable PDF called The Top 10 Things to Know to Practice ERP for OCD. Now, although anyone can actually experience thoughts or images that just pop into their head, having OCD causes you to have what we call sticky thoughts. And you tend to give significance or meaning to your thoughts in a way that makes them obsessive. And because these thoughts make you uncomfortable, fearful, or maybe anxious, you begin to do certain behaviors to try to calm yourself down. Now, these behaviors can become compulsions and reinforce your OCD cycle. To really see what's happening here with OCD, let's take a look at the OCD cycle together. Now, first, at the top, there's a fear trigger or an obsession. And this can be internal, it can be a thought, it can be an image or a sensation or a feeling. It can be external too. It can be objects, activities, environments. For example, touching a contaminated object, or leaving or entering buildings, or driving for some people, or interacting with certain people. The stimuli or fear trigger can really be just about anything. Then at number 2, there's a mental misappraisal. This is a mental error that occurs. We call that a threat misappraisal. It's a misjudgment, and it happens almost automatically, and your brain tells you something's bad, something's dangerous, something's harmful or wrong. And this is where that meaning and significance gets attached to the trigger. Now at number 3, there's tension and anxiety and discomfort that builds. Number 4, there's this immediate desire to seek safety, to avoid this uncomfortable thing that's happening. Now at number 5, this is where the ritualized or compulsive behaviors begin. The behaviors can be physical or mental. And the physical behaviors like checking, hand washing, cleaning, they're pretty easy to see that they're happening. Some of those compulsions and rituals can be functional, like washing your hands, for example, but it becomes very exaggerated. While other rituals related to the obsession trigger are not related to the obsession or trigger, like blinking your eyes or tapping your foot or something. But often there's these mental compulsions, especially for those people that identify themselves as having pure O, obsessions only OCD, and they begin to analyze the thought and ruminate about it and question it and pray it away or counter, neutralize it. They're mentally checking to see if that thought is still there, or they're trying to wish it away. These can all be compulsions that feed that OCD cycle. Now, some also try to avoid it altogether, right? Avoid the triggers altogether. And they may look to family members and others to help them feel safe, maybe seeking reassurance or other forms of accommodations. Now, in number 6, you can see that they get this short-term benefit from their compulsions by experiencing, a little short-term reduction in their anxiety and their distress. This is unfortunate because the reduction in anxiety actually reinforces the need for the compulsion. And then they don't have the opportunity that they would have to learn that they would have calmed down even without the ritual or the compulsion or the avoidance behavior. Now at number 7, if you have an OCD, you may understand this. There's an experience of negative thoughts and feelings like guilt and shame and depression and anger or frustration. In number 8, this distress leads to more anxiety, and this further reduces the tolerance of the original obsessive thought or fear trigger. And this reduced tolerance actually reinforces the OCD cycle. Now, the OCD cycle has a lot going on. It involves mental activity and physical activity and certain emotional activity, and it's self-perpetuating unless the cycle is broken. This is where ERP comes in. ERP, exposure and response prevention, is the gold standard evidence-based treatment for OCD. It can be used on its own or combined with other therapies like ACT or mindfulness or medication. Now let's look at the OCD cycle when we're applying ERP to it. So number 1, you're exposed to your original OCD trigger. Number 2, the threat appraisal. This is where you used to attach meaning and judgment to your thought or trigger. Now instead of thinking it's bad or wrong or terrible or dangerous, instead you recognize the trigger. Whether it be the thought or feeling or sensation, you recognize it and identify it as OCD. This identification of OCD already begins to diffuse you or separate you from the OCD. Now, it's not helpful to give yourself reassurance here because that can become compulsive. So try your best to identify it as OCD. And during ERP, even if you were to do nothing here, your brain still learns at a deeper experiential level that you're safe. Now at number 3, tension and anxiety builds. Even though you've identified it as OCD, your brain is still trying to figure out if this trigger or thought was dangerous. And you will still feel that tension and anxiety until your brain has learned. But we want this anxiety. It means that you're actually facing your fear and your brain is having this opportunity to learn that you're safe. So we notice the anxiety, but we don't do anything to calm it. Part of ERP is actually learning to tolerate the different levels of anxiety and learning that you can do it. And it does get easier over time. You could say, if you wanted, you could say out loud, I'm having this OCD thought and it's making me feel anxious. Or you could say nothing at all. Now in number 4, that urge and desire to seek safety is still there when you're beginning. But your brain is trying to, kind of convince you to seek safety or avoid or compulse or something. But the RP of ERP, the response prevention, means that you're prepared for this. You've decided you're willing to tolerate this anxiety and discomfort. You're resisting your urges. And you're staying in the exposure and you're not seeking safety. In number 5, instead of performing your mental and physical compulsions or avoiding the situation, you're practicing response prevention. Here you're tolerating the discomfort. You're tolerating the anxiety or the disgust. You're voluntarily staying in it without any mental analyzing or figuring things out. You're resisting your urges to compulse, and you're doing your best to practice response prevention. The learning actually stops if you go back to your rituals and compulsions. So you eventually want to practice response prevention before, during, and after the exposures. But sometimes we do have to follow certain rules to get us there. That's another lesson. In number 6, after not performing your compulsions, your brain is making new neural pathways, new safety learning that's associating with your obsession or your trigger. So your brain has just learned, hey, what you thought would happen didn't happen. Now in number 7, you now experience positive emotions. If you've ever been through ERP, you understand this. After a really tough exposure, you feel like I did it, and you feel like tremendously proud. In number 8, finally, you have now increased your tolerance to the obsessive thought or the fear trigger, and this weakens your OCD and weakens the cycle. So eventually, after repeating the process of ERP and doing a variety of exposures and extending the time and practice of response prevention, you will have created new neural pathways, incorporating safety learning, increased your tolerance for discomfort and anxiety, and you will have broken your OCD cycle. So if you're wondering if you have OCD, again, I left you a free assessment in the description below this video, along with the PDF download, the top 10 things you need to know to practice ERP for OCD. Until next time, I'll see you in session. Take care. Bye-bye.